Okay, so this is thanks for coming on and doing the first one. So this is the first one, so I don't really have any expectations about what's going to happen. But the idea is, obviously, I will let people know who you are, and what you do can probably come up in conversation, or will probably come up in conversation. But what I wanted to do was something a bit different. So I keep getting asked about doing a podcast, and I like chatting, and I like chatting to people, but there's quite a lot of work involved in a podcast. So what I thought was we could do some Facebook Lives, but with a bit of a twist to make it a little bit different. And I like to put a little bit of a spin on stuff. So I thought what we could do is invite some people in. So with Phoenix, I have a theme every month, and so the theme this month is communication, which I know is right up your street. And I thought what we could do is we can come in, we could talk about communication, but to put a bit of a spin on it, I don't get to know the questions in advance, so you get to ask me the questions. So whether you've got 5 questions on communication or 1 question on communication and then just 4 really random ones. That face has made me a little bit nervous now. So I don't know what you're going to ask me. So it's a bit of an opportunity for people who follow the page to maybe get to know me a little bit better. And I get to sit and drink tea and get put on the spot and
cool.
See what happens. So you are a professional facilitator.
I am.
Under the name of Jewell Facilitation.
Yep.
So what's a facilitator? I'll drill you with 1 or 2 questions first, and then you pay back.
Well, I can definitely answer that question. So a facilitator is someone who works with a group of people to basically hold space, help them have a creative, productive discussion. And it's commonly, the kind of facilitation I do means we do things like create strategic plans and set goals. And it's all about sort of helping everybody work together, get involved, everybody have an equal voice, stopping the shouty people and making sure the quieter people get involved, that kind of thing. So yeah,
that's cool. But it's not coaching, is it? It's not group coaching.
No, and it's not training either. So I guess a coach tends to, or in my mind at least, tends to work more with a kind of individual goals, possibly in a group. I would often, and this is not exclusively, but often I'll work with the group to help them to collaborate on something. So that's one thing. And it's different from training in the sense that I don't introduce any content. So I'm content neutral, as in I don't share my expertise in anything. I just help them to come up with ideas or bring their own ideas, bring some content into the room, and then I help them kind of untangle it and come up with something in the end.
And so you've got no buy-in of what their outcome is. You just want them to have an outcome that works for them and get them into agreement, but you've got no bias or kind of, you're not involved in what they're doing. So it's a completely objective person in the room.
So I am a member of the International Association of Facilitators, and we have all these kind of code of conduct, code of ethics, values that we get. And one of the core ones, I suppose, is to be neutral. So you don't say, oh, that's a really good idea, but I don't like it, or that's a daft thing to say. The idea is you help everybody contribute, and they'll decide whether it's the thing. You might help people to prioritize something, for example. It's not up to me to decide whether that's a good idea or a bad idea or something that's a good decision or whatever. It's up to them. So yes,
very cool. And you do a mean flip chart. I've seen your flip charts. I love your drawings and your images on your flip chart. So I don't think you can't have a workshop or a team meeting without a good flip chart, I reckon.
I do like a good flip chart. Sadly underused at the moment, but I've been using it with my kids actually. But I've been working more with digital whiteboards at the moment, so I've got something else to keep me happy.
So what's better, or what's easier, facilitating or homeschooling?
Oh, facilitating easily. I know what I'm doing when I'm facilitating. I've got not a clue when I'm homeschooling. And also I've got one in secondary and one in primary. So it's a bit like, kind of muddle along really. No, much prefer facilitating any day. So, yes.
Oh, brilliant.
It's all fine.
Yeah, I'm quite grateful that I haven't had to do that. So do you want to hit me? So your first question should be on the theme of communication. After that, oh, I just got a notebook and everything. After that, you've got 4 questions of your, just be kind. This is the first one.
Okay. So I've got them all written down here, you see, my little black book. Right, my first question is about communication. The others are a little bit random. Okay, so thinking about the last few months and all the stuff that's been going on, I kind of don't even know if I want to use the word pandemic, but anyway, how do you think the situation has affected the way we communicate? So I don't mean so much on a functional level, using whatever Zoom or not Zoom. I mean more on a kind of thinking about the types of things we talk about, the quality, the depth of discussions, because as a facilitator, it's something that really fascinates me. So I just wonder what your thoughts were on that.
So you mean in terms of content of conversation, what people are talking about rather than how they're using different forms to communicate?
A bit of content, but also I'm thinking about sort of how we communicate with each other. But I don't mean on a, I don't mean Zoom versus face-to-face, for example. I mean kind of, for example, I've noticed that if I see someone on the street, I'm a bit like, whoa, person. Get a bit excited. Well, I normally wouldn't do. And whereas I think the way, the kinds of things we say, the quantity of communication has changed somehow. And I just, wondered what your thoughts were on that.
So I think it's one of those things for me has been that we've all got something in common to talk about. So I think that's probably one of the key things, is that it has heavily dominated every conversation. And even when you try and avoid talking about it, it still comes up in some way in that conversation, because it's changing our day-to-day schedules and it's changing the way that we're living. And we've had that kind of period of uncertainty, and then we've kind of started to get into a bit of a routine, and now we're okay, that bit of uncertainty again of, can we do this now, can we not do that now, like where are we heading with it? So I think I've definitely noticed that it's brought that commonality of we've all got that we're all experiencing the same thing. We're all experiencing it in different ways. So I'm hearing a lot more people sort of showing a bit more interest in people's lives and how it's affected them. So, I guess especially with business conversations, you wouldn't normally ask about how your children getting on with homeschool. You wouldn't normally ask about how people's children are getting on in school, or you wouldn't normally ask, what is it you're missing, or, what have you done differently? So I think the kind of depth of conversations have changed a little bit. So I think we're finding out more about individuals and what's important to them and how they've been impacted. I think I think it would be fair to say there's been a fair amount of judgment of, people making some judgment over how the choices that people have made and why they've made them or how they've made them. So I think that's been really interesting in seeing people's values come forward and seeing how people are, and I don't mean necessarily with malice, a judgment with malice, but more just that kind of, oh, well, so-and-so's doing this, or I don't think I could do that. And even now, as things are starting to open, there's almost that genuine interest of who's choosing to go and take advantage of things being open, and who's still very much, no, I'm going to stay here and I'm going to wait until things have settled down a little bit. I'll let you guys do the firsts, and then I'll wait until things have settled down. So I think there's definitely been more interest in people's personal lives, a little bit more past the questions we would normally make as sort of polite British conversations. So I think there's been a bit more interest in that. And then I think that the values, people's values have definitely come through in different ways. And I think that's probably where the judgment is. Even, like I said, it's not a malice judgment. It's not a negative or, although you have seen it. But I think for most people, it's just that genuine, oh, I'm not sure I could do that, or I'm not sure I would do that at the moment. So
yeah,
definitely changing. And I think even when you have those conversations of, okay, we're not going to talk about that today, this is going to be a COVID-free conversation, the impact of COVID still comes up in that conversation, because it is having so much of an impact across so many elements of everyday life and business and work and children and all the rest of it. So I mean, is that what are you noticing similar, or is that the kind of thing that you were thinking about?
Yeah, definitely. And I think, for example, some of the workshops I've done, I've had to leave a bigger gap at the beginning, because people often have something that they need to kind of they need to maybe say how they are. They need that chance to talk about what's going on in their lives, which doesn't, in my experience anyway, happen quite so much in workshops. And I think it's that kind of, somehow our communication has been curtailed or squashed or changed in a way that means sometimes as soon as we get that kind of opportunity, we're a bit like, blah, 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 let's just, and because, as you're saying, it kind of impacts everything about what we're doing at the moment, and we can't kind of leave it to one side. Even if we're not talking about COVID, it does impact us, and I think people need that little bit of more, I don't know, that kind of human element to be injected into whatever situation it is, just to give people that kind of opportunity. So, but I find it quite interesting to see. I've just observed it in a few places.
I think people's interactions have changed as well. So you haven't got people going out to work. You've got people working from home, and then you possibly got partners working from home. So I think where you would have had that sort of free, very sort of clear boundaries of, this is work time, this is my time with my work hat on, this is my time with my parent hat on, this is my time with my partner hat on, and this is my me time. Those boundaries have completely changed. So I think it's almost, people are trying to step into that change of communication to almost put themselves like, I'm in work mode, Zoom call, work mode, don't just almost putting that hat, mentally putting the hat on, because they're not getting into a car and driving to work and switching that state. So it's like one conversation as a parent, 2 seconds later, you're focusing on a Zoom call and in work mode. So I think it's watching people in that first couple of minutes of just settling into the space that they're now in, rather than the space that they were in 2 seconds ago. So I wonder whether that's maybe part of it.
Yeah, definitely. No, that's really interesting. Actually.
It's definitely.
I've got that leads me perhaps into my another question. I'm allowed to move on to another question.
And I haven't seen these questions, I promise.
So this is actually question number 4 in my list of questions, but I feel like it's related to what we're talking about. I'm going to go into question number 4.
Okay.
So this is about about the fact that for me, and for a lot of other people at the moment, my brain's a bit fried with this whole homeschool, work, home admin, whatever you want to call it, juggle. And I recognise that some of this for me is about a bit of a loss of identity of, normally I am, dual facilitation, business owner, facilitator, etc., etc. And now I've been thrown into this whole different lifestyle. And I was just wondering what advice you would give me and loads of other people like me who are having this kind of, I guess, like identity crisis, brain fry at the moment.
Yeah, I think it's that certainly people that I have spoken to, people that I've been working with, that resetting those boundaries has been quite a challenge for people, that it's all now under one roof. And then I think as times change and we start to move into the new normal, and I've used the word new normal for since day one, and now everybody's using it, and the new normal. I feel like
you're a trendsetter.
I can't say it without doing this, and I'm annoying myself when I do it. But I think as we start to move and we start to move into what is coming into the future, there's an opportunity to really reset the boundaries. And I think we've all been given an opportunity. Some people have used it quite consciously, and some people, it's the decisions have probably been made for them because they haven't really sat down and thought it all through, which, you know, different people deal with things in different ways. But I think I'm certainly hearing and seeing a lot of people now that are looking at, okay, what has lockdown looked like? What did I enjoy about it? You know, some people have really enjoyed having all of the hats on during the day and being able to multitask and make it all work and be at home, and others are desperate to go back into an environment where there's a very clear walk through the door. This is Helen from Jewell Facilitation. This is what I'm here to do. And then when that's done, back in the car and then, or back on your bike, and then kind of cycle home, debrief in your head, walk through the door and go, Mum's home. And so some people have really enjoyed that fuzzy boundary, and some people are like, okay, no, I need to put those boundaries back in place. So I think it's been really interesting and I think it will be even more interesting moving forward of how people will start to have those conversations with either their employers or their bosses of, you know, people who've quite enjoyed not having to commute, being at home, being able to multitask and do all of the things all of the time, or, you know, certainly having some set time periods in their home, and how they want to hold on to that going back into work. And then there's going to be people that will be in the desk next to them that don't want to work from home. They don't want to work flexible hours. They like the routine and they like that certainty of, I need to be here at this time, wearing these kind of clothes, having these kind of conversations, doing this kind of work, and then I will go home and be parent, partner.
Yeah. That's interesting. So yeah, I guess setting boundaries. I think for me, I'm definitely in the I need some boundaries camp, and I think a lot of people, you know, I don't think I've spoken to many people who've enjoyed the lockdown. Mostly, it's a lot of people I've spoken to who are parents of younger children, and they're sort of struggling to manage that sort of 1 minute, as you were saying earlier. 1 minute you're, you know, talking about, I don't know, Minecraft and whatever science quizzes, and the next minute you're talking about, you know, facilitating a workshop, or I don't know, doing social media posts. And it's that, I guess, yeah, maybe it's blocking it off. I think maybe that's a
and I think some people have been able to do that, and I do think it does depend very much on the age of your children as well, and also the home situation of who else is there to help divide that workload and divide that time up. So I think people have tried to put some boundaries in place, but I think, you know, 3 and 5 year olds, that they don't respect your boundaries. Then I want squash and biscuit now. I don't care that you are live on BBC News. This is I want your attention, and I want it now. So I think, you know, you've seen people try to set those boundaries and try to set that clear space, but, you know, let's face it, children just they got their own schedule, haven't they?
Yeah, they have. It's usually around
not the same as ours.
No, definitely. That's interesting. Okay, next question. You ready for my next one?
Yeah, I'll go for it.
So this is also, these are in a different order to which I wrote them, but actually I think this kind of follows on a little bit. So this one's about planning, because I know, because we've known each other for quite a while, that you are really good at sticking to plans that you make. So and as a facilitator, I help groups, you know, create strategic plans, set goals, and do all kinds of lovely planning and next steps, and you know, really kind of set objectives and do that really nicely. And then coming to me, and actually my own plans, I'm not too bad at setting the plans for myself, but actually following them through, I am not very good at. So what do you do that I should be doing? And other people, I know there's plenty of people like me who like, you know, creating lovely plans, but I'm not very good at following them through.
So I don't know how wide this screen is, but yeah, can you see if I turn the camera slightly, can you see brown paper and post-it notes? So that is my level of planning. I've I just planned the next 3 months, so that's why there's lots on there. So essentially that's my a 12-week to-do list, but it's down on notes. So I'll talk about what I do. Obviously, when I'm working with people and we're goal setting and planning, we work to what works for them. But in general, so what I do is I start with the end in mind. So I look at where I'm trying to get to, and the first thing that I do is start to look at the milestones. So what are my key dates where I've got to deliver things at certain times, and then I'll track back from that. With my post-it notes, what I've got on them is one task per post-it note, and so these are in columns of months, but then in rows of weeks. So I can look at what I need to achieve by setting it out into the weeks beforehand. So if, say, for example, I need to deliver something by the end of the month, then I will chunk it down into small tasks, and then I will divide those out across the weeks. And then when I look at my week, so I will take the row and I'm like, right, okay, that's what I need to do this week. And then I will look at my calendar and I'll look to see what pockets of time I've got that I can put those into. So some of the tasks I try not to make any tasks longer than 2 hours, because my attention span doesn't stretch much further than that. So reason why I keep it in 2-hour time slots, but also if something comes up, a 2-hour time slot is a lot easier to reschedule than a half-day time slot. So I put it down into anything that takes longer than 2 hours. I chunk it down again into another just keep breaking it down into smaller tasks. So then when I look at my week, I can look at my days, look at clients, workshops, meetings, and then I can see where my gaps of time are, and then I can see, right, okay, I can do that one in there, that one in there, that one in there, and I can spread it out across the week. So I start with the quarter, break it down into the months, break it down into the weeks, and then look at my days. So that's how I plan. And I think as a general principle, that works for a lot of people, but then when you get into the detail of how you make that work and how you commit to it or show up to it and how you balance that in with other priorities, that's a very individual thing. I did a goal setting check-in workshop last weekend, and one of the things that came up quite a bit in that workshop was the crossover of emotional investment of how important it is to you versus the energy that you need to invest in making it happen. So if you think you've got a high emotional involvement, so it's something that's really, really important to you that you want to make happen, but because you've got 2 young children and you're homeschooling and you've got your work to do and your partner's got work to do, the amount of energy, physical or mental energy, you've got to invest in it right now is dropped. So if you think about during COVID, there's lots of things that people would have set at the beginning of the year, New Year's resolutions or goals, that they would have had high emotional investment in. It was something that was really important to them that they wanted to make happen. And it might still be that they've still got that high emotional investment, but because of COVID and changes in situation circumstances, the amount of energy that they can invest into it right now has dropped. So you've got that conflict of really, really, really wanting to make it happen. Even if you had all of the will all the will in the world, you just can't make it happen. And so then you get that rub of frustration. So sometimes just taking that step back and saying, okay, how important is it? Realistically, what time have I got? How much energy have I got? What can I do to make this happen over what period of time? Do I need to stretch it? As they'd say in project management, do you move the timeline to the right and give yourself a little bit longer? Or do you recognize that actually there are other things that need your emotional investment right now, and just ease off on that a little bit. So quite often that's the conflict in making it happen. So I think there's probably a two-part answer to your question, and there's the planning and the preparation, and then there's the perseverance to actually get it done, and maybe, you know, some of the challenges of, even when you want to show up, of the reality of being able to show up.
That's really interesting, actually. Yeah, no, that makes total sense to me. And I think, interestingly, the chunking idea, I've probably, although overall recently I've got less done, I've actually probably been more productive because I've had to, you know, I've had to grab 2 hours here and an hour there. And so I've probably been more productive because I've not had a whole day in which I've crammed lots of ideas. But, I'm also, that whole kind of frustration and emotional investment, I think that really makes sense to me. So yeah, okay. I totally understand that. And
what you can do is like put it into the grid will have a name, but I'm not quite sure what it is. But you'd have the vertical line and a horizontal line. So you'd have the emotional investment on one line and the energy on the other, and then you've got two highs, you know, high emotional involvement but low energy, and you'd put one in each square. So the exercise that I did on Sunday was, okay, where is it now? And if you were to move it into one of those other squares, so reduce or increase in different ways, and it sat in a different square, how might that feel different, and how might that actually help you to keep moving things forward, even if it's a slower pace or on a different schedule? How does it help you to keep maybe a slightly different momentum, but it does help you to keep moving it forward?
I like that. That's really similar to a tool I use, which is the impact effort matrix, and I think it's the same kind of thing. So yeah, okay, I'm taking that tip.
That does sound very similar.
I like it. Okay, this is all very interesting. How long have we got? Right, next question. This one's about change. Okay, so we're all going through a significant, quite dramatic kind of transition and change at the moment. What kinds of things do you think I mean, maybe we've touched on some of this already, but what kinds of things do you think will help us to kind of keep stable and not sort of fall over in this sort of, feels like a kind of wave or a washing machine somehow, like we're in this quite a turbulent time?
Yeah. So what's the question? How do people,
what do you think, so from your experience and from all the amazing stuff that you know about as a coach, what do you think will helps us to kind of stay stable in the sort of turbulence, I suppose?
So so the thing that's coming through in my mind is the circle of control and the circle of influence. And I think that for me would be the place to start. So draw a big circle and write in there all of the things that are absolutely in your control right now, because let's face it, there's a huge amount of stuff that is not in our control at all. Start with a circle of what is in your control and just list everything off, everything that impacts you and the important people in your world, and list off all of the things that you can control, and then an outside circle around that, and start to list off things that are not in your control but you can influence. So you've got some say over it, although it's not 100% in your control. Anything that doesn't exist in those two circles, you've got to park it. You've got to put it to one side. There may be a time where that changes and it will move into the circle of influence, or it moves into the circle of control. When it appears in those, then you can give it your energy. But until then, you kind of have to say, not in my control, not in my power. It gets put in the box on the shelf until something changes. If you focus your energy primarily into that circle of control, you feel more in control, because you're putting your energy into things that you can change, into things that you can manage, into things that you can control, rather than throwing lots of energy into something that is probably not going to have any impact at all. So I'd say for most people at this stage, if you're really in that state of chaos, that's probably a good place to start, is circle of control, circle of influence, and then just work out what that looks like. If you look at the change curve, you're looking at where you want to move into, but ultimately what that looks like at the moment on a grand scale, so a world scale, we don't know what that's going to look like. But what we can do is control what we can control in the here and now, and we can start to think about what we want in our own little worlds. But ultimately, there's lots of things that haven't yet been decided, that we don't know what the timeline will be. There's lots of things that we haven't got that information to feed into knowing whether or not it's a possibility or whether it's never going to happen. So for now, I would say for a lot of people, it's just focus on what's in your control, look at what's in that circle of influence that you can start to think about, and go from there. But anything that doesn't appear in those two circles, it's got to go in the box on the shelf until something changes, until Boris appears and tells you something different, and then you might be able to move it in. But there's lots of things out there that even the people who make that decision, they don't know yet. So for us little people at the bottom of the ladder, we're worrying about something that the people who are going to make that decision aren't worrying about yet. So it's just that balance of where do you put your energy and attention.
That's really interesting. And the idea of chaos as well, I think, and I guess maybe our circle of control, or what we're able to put in there, is sort of increasing over time. When you mentioned chaos, I think, 3 months ago, I felt like I was in massive chaos, and probably then, from what you're saying, my circle of control was like a pinhead, and now it feels like it's much, much better. I guess, would that be the sort of way it goes, I guess?
Yeah, when I hear the word chaos, I see the picture of like a big wave, and you can either ride the wave and control how you ride the wave, or you can try and control the wave itself. And ultimately, we can't control the wave itself, but we know that the wave is going to end up on the beach. So it's just focusing on keeping your balance on the top of the wave. And see, I have an image of myself, like a Bond girl gliding seamlessly onto the beach. I know that wouldn't happen. I know that it would be a full face plant and a face full of sand, but I'm going to go with the image that I've got.
No, I really
and I'm
like
going to stick with that analogy.
One. It's interesting, actually. My last newsletter I wrote a couple of months ago, very sporadic at the moment. I think it was entitled something like "Hanging Onto the Surfboard," because I remember as I wrote it, I felt like I was in this sort of wave. So it's interesting you mentioned that. And I was just about clinging onto the surfboard. I felt like I wasn't surfing yet. I wasn't even properly on the surfboard, let alone standing up. But at the time I wrote it, I felt like I was, just on top of the wave, not sinking anymore. Yeah. So, love a good analogy. Cool. Okay, I've got one last question.
Oh, brilliant.
We can both go surfing together one day. Right. Ready for my last question?
I would be face full of sand. Yes, go for it.
I've never managed to surf. So, okay, this is nothing to do. This is more sort of a technical question, I suppose. As a facilitator, I've got lots of kind of go-to tools I use. So, for example, I have a questioning process I really like, which is called ORID, where you go through objective, reflective, interpretive, and decisional questions. I like doing, I have a consensus building process I use to help people come up with a consensus. And I've got a variety of, let's say, brainstorming tools I use. And I try and tell people to stop doing the whole shout at the flip chart thing, because that's not a very good method. As a coach, what are your kind of go-to tools that you like to use? Do you have some? Maybe
I have so many. Yeah, well, there's so many different. Sorry, did you say top five?
Top five. I'm mirrored. I've realised I'm on the wrong side, but anyway. There's
so many frameworks within coaching, and I think the for me, the beauty of what I do in in working with lots of different people with different things is that I get to use different tools, different frameworks with different people, because firstly, the challenges that they're working through are very, very different. And then secondly, the people who are working through them are very different and need something different. So that's such a good question. I don't know that they are, it's really difficult because a lot of them probably have names for them, but they're not necessarily names that I would use. So you know that I have done the NLP Master Practitioner, but I've also done CBT, some positive psychology type work. I've also got the work that I did when I was with the police, which was much more sort of corporate executive coaching and mentoring. So in terms of what's in the toolbox, there's quite a lot in there. I think this may not answer your question, but it may also answer the question, is that it probably is more where the focus is. So it's things like making sure that I'm working with the person, and the focus is on helping the person and not focusing on the problem. So you're coaching the person, not coaching the problem. So you're coaching the person, because it's not, a bit like with you with the facilitation, I have an invested interest in the person that I'm working with, but I don't necessarily have an invested interest in what the outcome is. So what they choose to do and how they choose to deal with it, my role within that, which might be the second one, is to be the guide and they're the explorer. So I really like that analogy of I'm sort of helping, keeping them safe and on track, and different analogies you can use around that, but they are exploring their world, their life, what's important to them, and choosing what path they want to take. Yeah. So again, that's probably not, it is a tool, but it's probably more kind of that framework. Yeah. Again, I think I probably kind of have some kind of questions that I seem to ask over and over again, because it helps people with focus. So for me, it's focusing on the person and not the problem. So that's the reminder for me, is to make sure that the conversation's around them and what they want, rather than working through the problem, because then you're helping people with their internal resources, so their skills, their tools, their character, to manage not just the problem that they're talking about at the moment, but future problems as well. So if we can focus on that, it's unlocking sometimes things that, and they are there. It's just sometimes for people it's been a bit dormant for a while they've been focusing on other things, so it's kind of untapped their own resources. So okay, focus on the person, not the problem. What was the second thing I just said? I'm going around in circles on this one.
It's just interesting. I've just caught on the problem not person thing, or person not problem thing. I think possibly facilitation's the other way around. It's I focus on the problem and I involve the person, obviously, and I focus on making sure the person, but I focus a bit more probably on the outcome, and that I hadn't really made that connection before you mentioned it. So that's really interesting.
That's really interesting. I think that another question that I probably ask quite a lot is, okay, what do you want? What do you want instead? So bringing them out of that, talking about the problem, and get them to start talking about potential solutions and alternatives and different things that they could do and different consequences that might happen as a result of that. So I think that's 3. One I learned really recently was, she called it like a traffic light technique. So it's not a technique, more of a framework. It's a coach called Laurie Shook. She's American, but she called it, it's like a traffic light. So you work through with the person and you ask them different questions, and they tell you whether that's a stop, pause, or a go. Around certain elements of things that they're working through, which is a very visual. So if you're working with somebody who's very visual, that's a great framework to use. So the thing that you described, where you take them through different types of questions, so you take them through the different types of questions, but what they're answering is stop, pause, as in it's something I might consider but not right now, and then go, you can see that they like, let's do, I want to do that, let me try that. And then there's other things that, no, that's definitely not what I want to do. And there's other things that, okay, that might work, but not right now. So that traffic light framework has been really, I think, really interesting. So that's 4. I think also just getting people to that visualization of, okay, we know how things are now, so it's that present state, but getting them to really sit and talk through the future state. And I think just sometimes giving people, like you do with facilitation, giving people that space, but just giving people that time to think about what might be possible, but really start to imagine it and see that it is possible. Because until somebody gets to that stage where they see that it could happen, and they start to see that it might help it to happen, that, you know, you have to be able to believe. It's that see it, believe it, achieve it, isn't it? That until I can do all of the cheerleading in the world of encouragement and support and guidance, but unless that individual really starts to believe it themselves, it's still just conversation, isn't it? So for that visualization of, okay, what will be different when you achieve this? What will be different when you've done this? What will feel different? What will the people around you be like? What will your days look like? What will be different for you? And just really get them to step into that and see that and feel that it's possible. I think, you know, a lot of what we do is very much up here, and I think visualization really gives people a chance to kind of sit down and go, okay, what feels different if I was to get that job, or if I was to change my health and well-being, if I was to take some time out for self-care, or find that balance a lot better, what would feel different? So it's not just a smart objective, it's something that they can really picture that looks and feels different, and what else is different around them. And I think that's probably just until that individual has got themselves to a place where they feel it's possible, it's very difficult for them to want to take that step forward, because they're taking a step into an unknown, whereas visualization starts to give them something to step into. I'm not sure that answered your question, but I'm also not sure it's quite as tangible as in terms of techniques and frameworks, and there's just so many as well. And it's being able to go into the toolbox and find the, you know, different things for different people and different things that they're working through. And there's some things that I have used with a lot of people, and there's some techniques that I've only used with 1 or 2 people over 5 years. So it's one of those toolboxes. It's hard to get the lid down, but there is some good stuff.
I think it's interesting just listening to you talk about it, actually, how obviously what you do is very intuitive, and you don't necessarily, I guess, you don't design a kind of, this is how this session's going to be. Which is, that's how I do my work. Although I deviate and move and flex, I will have some sort of, you know, session plan, let's say a process to follow. Whereas I guess from just listening to you obviously, you're much more intuitive and much more, you respond to your client in a whatever they need kind of way. So I can understand why it's not as, you know, this tool, then this tool, then this tool.
I mean, you've got things like the GROW model, you know, that a lot of coaches will use. But I think for me, it's I think, and there are different coaching models. But I think you've kind of nailed it really in that sort of intuitive of what do they need. I mean, I love working, you know, we talked about analogies and different metaphors. I love working with analogies and metaphors, because for the individual, especially if it's something that's been quite traumatic or quite difficult for them, we can talk through analogies and metaphors, and they don't have to talk about the problem itself. But I can still get an understanding for what that feels like for them. So when you then work with the metaphors, and I've done a full hours coaching session with somebody who didn't tell me what it was, and we had this and this, and we spent the whole hour moving this and this around, and playing about with it and changing it, and I have no idea to this day what this is or what that was.
That's amazing.
But it meant something to them. They described to me what it felt like. They described to me what that was like for them, what felt different for them when they moved it, until we got to a place where, you know, the person said, that's it, that's what I want. And I was like, that's great. I have no idea. But it's not, again, it's not about me problem solving. It's about me supporting them to solve the problem in a way that works for them. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it does make sense. It's really interesting because I've never really I've never asked that question before. I've never thought about it, but I thought that's really interesting.
Still no idea, but yeah. Interesting. Yeah, we have not. That was your last question, wasn't it?
It was.
Have been so focused on answering, I've not checked the comments. So
sorry,
I don't think they're questions. I think they are more comments. So Charlotte, I'm going to come back to you individually if that's okay, just on the comment that you have made. And if Charlotte, actually, in terms of what you've written, if there's anything that I can help with, please feel free to contact. So Jenny has talked about, for parents, it's the extra challenge of flipping between parent and professional identity. To the extent, parents have done amazingly over the last couple of months, and grandparents too. But also, I think when you're used to having that support network, I think that's been the real challenge, hasn't it? And not just for parents who would normally reach out to the support network, but for the support network who've not been able to reach out and help.
Definitely.
You know, so I can talk about, you know, my mum and stepdad in that I know that they desperately missed, you know, looking after their grandchildren and being a part of their, you know, their day-to-day lives. That's been a real challenge for them. So I think it's kind of a two-sided coin, really. There's been the challenge for parents not having that support network there and being able to still do what needs to be done, but also for the grandparents and others who've kind of had that taken away, really, haven't they? But hopefully now that we've got bubbles, such a great word. Now we're bringing bubbles together. Hopefully that will help. Okay, so Ashtrack, thank you. Good to see you. And Charlotte saying traffic lights is good at helping people. Yeah, it's just a very visual, and it doesn't need a long answer. You just ask them the question and they say red, amber, green, and you make a note of it, and it's kind of that quick fire, get out of your head, let's just fire off the answers, of not overthinking it, of just kind of that, again, probably just helping that intuitive response come through. I think there's lots of people that are very happy to see grandparents again, and I think probably lots of very happy grandparents too. Thank you so much. I enjoyed that.
Thank you.
Which is probably just as well, seeing as I've got quite a few more looked in. And we got through the technical, so I know for next time, don't try and do it on Facebook. Just go straight to this and get cracking. But thank you so much. Great questions.
Thank you for having me. I enjoyed it.
Good to see you. Right. Enjoy the rest of your day. And thank you, everybody who tuned in. I will see you all very soon. Bye.